The number didn't make sense. $210,000. It glowed on the document like a dare, sitting there beneath the words, responsible party. Emily stared at it while the rest of the room pretended not to notice her hesitation. Christmas lights blinked lazily around the living room, as if they hadn't been invited into something deeply inappropriate. Her family was gathered, smiling too easily. Someone passed cookies. Someone laughed a little too loud. The house smelled like cinnamon and denial. "Just sign it," Daniel said gently. "The way you speak to someone you're sure won't say no." Emily felt the weight of the pen in her hand. It was heavier than it had any right to be. She thought about her savings account, the one she never talked about, the one built from skipped vacations and cheap lunches, and the quiet pride of being the responsible one. Funny how responsibility always seems to find the same person. The document wasn't complicated. That was the problem. No one explained why she was the responsible party. No one explained why the insurance policies weren't in her name. No one explained why this had to happen tonight, wrapped in Christmas paper and family obligation. She looked up. Every face avoided her eyes. That was when she realized something was wrong. Not loudly wrong, not explosively wrong, but wrong in the way a floor creaks right before it gives way. The kind of wrong that only shows itself if you're paying attention. Emily smiled. Reflex, muscle memory. Inside, something cracked. Because suddenly the question wasn't whether signing would cost her money. It was whether staying silent would cost her everything else. The pen didn't move. Emily noticed that first, the stillness of it. Her fingers were wrapped around the cheap plastic body. The logo of a local bank faded from years of being passed out at events no one remembered. She had used that pen before to sign leases, insurance forms, student loan paperwork, important things, necessary things. This felt different. Across the dining table, the document lay flat, perfectly aligned with the table edge, as if someone had taken extra care to make it look harmless. Daniel had done that. Daniel always straightened papers. He believed order was the same thing as responsibility. "Em," her mother said softly, drawing out the word the way she used to when Emily was a child who had paused too long before obeying. "Just sign it so we can eat. The food's getting cold." Emily glanced toward the kitchen. The turkey sat carved and untouched. Steam no longer rose from it. Someone had turned the oven off already, an unconscious decision that said, this is more important than dinner, even if no one would ever admit it. She looked back down at the page. Responsible party, Emily Tran. The words felt oddly formal, like they belonged to someone else. She read them again, slower this time, as if a different meaning might appear if she stared long enough. Daniel cleared his throat. He sat at the head of the table, relaxed, fingers loosely folded, wearing the calm expression of a man who believed he was being very reasonable. His sweater was new. Emily noticed that too. Dark green, expensive looking, the kind of thing you buy when you're confident about your finances. "It's really straightforward," he said. "Just a formality." Formality. Emily almost smiled at that. She shifted in her chair, the wood creaking beneath her. Everyone else stayed very still. It struck her then, how practiced this stillness was. Like they were all waiting for a cue they already knew by heart. Her younger cousin scrolled on his phone under the table. Her aunt pretended to adjust the napkins for the third time. Her sister avoided eye contact entirely, staring instead at a crack in the wall as if it were suddenly fascinating. No one asked if Emily had questions. That should have been the first red flag. Emily always had questions. It was practically her brand. At work, people joked that if you wanted a problem exposed, you just had to put Emily in the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just asked the kind of questions that made silence uncomfortable. And yet, here she was, holding a pen, surrounded by family, feeling like the only person who hadn't been briefed. "What exactly am I signing for?" she asked. The room exhaled, almost imperceptibly. Daniel smiled. We already explained that. Emily kept her tone even. Explain it again. A flicker passed over his face, irritation quickly buried. It's just to make sure everything's covered. Medical costs, outstanding balances, worst-case scenarios. Whose balances? Emily asked. Daniel laughed lightly, too lightly. Why are you making this sound so dramatic? Her mother chimed in. Emily, don't start. This is not the time. That word again, start. As if asking for clarity were a bad habit she needed to break. Emily looked down at the number. $210,000. She did the math automatically. Years of saving. Years of saying no. Years of being the one who didn't need help, didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for much. The one who was fine. A small, inappropriate thought crossed her mind. If responsibility were a sport, I'd be undefeated. She almost laughed, then stopped herself. Humor had a way of slipping out at the wrong times, and this was definitely one of them. Why is my name the only one here? She asked instead. Silence. Not awkward silence, not confused silence, calculated silence. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Because you're the most organized, he said. You're good with paperwork. You always have been. That was true. Emily had been filling out forms for other people since she was 13. Permission slips, applications, appeals. She remembered sitting at the kitchen table late at night, translating documents for her parents, learning early that being capable meant being useful. She also remembered that being useful rarely meant being protected. Her sister finally spoke, voice tight. You're overthinking it. We're family. Emily nodded slowly. That's why I'm asking. She scanned the document again. Legal language slid past her eyes, dense, deliberate, exhausting. It was designed that way. Wear someone down long enough and they'll sign just to make the discomfort stop. Daniel slid the pen closer to her, just an inch or two. A small gesture, a telling one. Look, he said, softer now. We wouldn't put you in a bad position. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. Emily felt something shift inside her at those words. Not anger, not fear. Recognition. People said that when they hadn't actually checked. She placed the pen back on the table, parallel to the document, mirroring the careful neatness Daniel loved so much. I need to read this properly, she said. Her mother frowned. Tonight? Yes, Emily replied, calm, steady. Tonight. For the first time all evening, Daniel's smile didn't come back right away. And Emily understood, with quiet certainty, that whatever this was, it wasn't as simple as they wanted her to believe. Something had already begun, and no one else at the table seemed ready to admit it. Emily didn't sleep much that night. She lay on her bed staring at the ceiling fan as it made its lazy, uneven circle, the kind that always threatened to wobble itself loose but never quite did. The house was quiet now, too quiet for a place that had been so full of voices just hours earlier. Christmas had retreated into the walls, leaving behind only the faint smell of pine and reheated food. At 2:17 a.m., she got up. Old habit. When something didn't make sense, Emily didn't sit with it emotionally. She audited it. She padded into her small home office, flicked on the desk lamp, and opened her laptop. The light felt harsh after the darkness, but she welcomed it. Bright things had a way of telling the truth. Her banking app loaded quickly. Emily had always liked that about money. It didn't lie, didn't dodge questions, didn't tell you that you were overthinking. The numbers were there, whether you wanted to look at them or not. Savings? Healthy. Not extravagant, but solid. Emergency fund? Intact. Retirement contributions? On schedule. No debt beyond a manageable mortgage, and a car she planned to drive until it officially qualified as a historical artifact. She stared at the total longer than usual. This wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that she could take care of herself. Proof that she didn't need rescuing. Proof that every quiet sacrifice had added up to something tangible. While others had floated through life, assuming things would work out, Emily had built contingencies. She opened a spreadsheet she rarely showed anyone. Rows of numbers. Categories labeled in plain, almost boring language. Medical. Family emergencies. Worst case. She scrolled. Worst case? Untouched. Until now. Emily leaned back in her chair and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A laugh escaped her, short, incredulous. Of course, she muttered. Christmas. If disasters had a sense of humor, they would absolutely schedule themselves around the holidays. Nothing says festive like financial ambush. She thought about the document again, the way her name stood alone, the way no one had explained why, the way Daniel had said everything will be fine, like a spell he expected her to believe in. Emily wasn't paranoid. She didn't jump to conclusions, but she was very, very good at pattern recognition. And the pattern here was familiar. She had always been the buffer, the margin of error, the person everyone relied on without ever quite acknowledging the cost. At work, it was called being dependable. In her family, it was just expected. She remembered her first job out of college when her manager had praised her for handling pressure so well. What he meant was, you don't complain when we give you more than your share. Emily had smiled then too. She'd learned early that pushing back made people uncomfortable. A faint smile tugged at her lips now. Humor, again, her brain's emergency exit. Well, she whispered to the empty room, this time they picked the wrong overachiever. She pulled the document from her bag and laid it flat on the desk. Under the lamp, the language looked even colder, clinical, detached. The kind of wording that protected institutions, not people. Her eyes skimmed the clauses more carefully this time. Liability, duration, enforcement. Emily's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a favor. This was exposure. She reached for a yellow highlighter, then paused, realizing how absurdly on-brand that was. Nothing says rebellion like office supplies, she thought, snorting softly to herself. Still, she highlighted. She marked every section that transferred responsibility without authority, every sentence that assumed consent rather than asked for it, every line that depended on her silence. By the time she finished, the page looked bruised. Emily leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers laced together. She didn't feel angry, not yet. What she felt was something quieter and sharper. Clarity. If she signed this, she wouldn't just be helping her family. She would be subsidizing their decisions while forfeiting her own safety. She would become the invisible foundation everyone stood on and no one defended. And once that happened, there would be no undoing it. She closed her laptop and sat back. For the first time, a question formed, not about the document, but about herself. When had she agreed to this role? She thought of every time she'd said, "It's fine, I can handle it." Every time she'd absorbed stress so others wouldn't have to. Every time she'd been praised for being strong, when what she'd really been was quiet. Emily stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty, dusted with leftover snow. A neighbor's inflatable Santa had collapsed sideways, half deflated, looking like he'd given up on joy altogether. She laughed, louder this time. "Same, buddy," she said. But then her expression sobered, because unlike the inflatable Santa, she could stand back up. If you were standing where Emily stood right then, looking at a clean life you'd built with care, knowing one signature could quietly unravel it, would you have gone along to keep the peace? Or would you have paused, even if it meant becoming the problem? I'm curious how you see it. Share your thoughts. I pay attention to every one." Emily turned away from the window. Tomorrow, she would ask questions. Calm ones. Reasonable ones. The kind no one could accuse her of being dramatic for asking. She would listen carefully, not just to the answers, but to how quickly they came, and how much effort went into smoothing them. For now, she slipped the document back into her bag and turned off the light. She didn't know exactly what she would find, but she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever this cost, it would not be invisible anymore. The joke landed like a dropped glass, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough of a crack to make everyone freeze for half a second and then pretend nothing had happened. It was the afternoon after Christmas, and the family had regrouped in the living room as if the tension from the night before had been a minor scheduling error. Coats were draped over chairs, mugs of reheated coffee in hand, voices deliberately casual. This was their reset button. Act normal long enough and the problem might shrink itself. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, posture relaxed, expression neutral. If anyone were watching closely, they might have noticed how still she was. Emily had learned that stillness made people talk. Daniel stood near the window, phone in hand, scrolling with the air of someone who felt very much in control of things. He looked up, smirked, and said, "Well, at least if this all goes south, we know who to send the bill to." A beat, then a few chuckles. Automatic, obligatory. Emily smiled too, out of instinct, not amusement. Her fingers tightened around her mug. She felt the heat of the coffee, too hot, almost burning, but she didn't pull away. "Relax," Daniel added quickly, waving a hand. "I'm kidding." Of course he was. He always was. That was the genius of it, really. Humor as insulation. Say something sharp, wrap it in a laugh, and if anyone flinches, it's their fault for being sensitive. Emily had seen that move her entire life. She'd even used it herself once or twice, back when she thought fitting in was the same thing as belonging. She took a slow sip of coffee, buying herself a second to observe. Daniel's tone had been light, but his confidence was absolute. Not nervous humor, not defensive humor. The kind that assumes agreement. The kind that tests boundaries under the cover of charm. Her mother laughed a little too loudly. Her sister avoided Emily's eyes again. Someone changed the subject almost immediately, talking about traffic, about weather, about nothing. No one checked on her reaction. Emily set her mug down carefully. Her hand trembled, just slightly, enough that she noticed. That annoyed her more than the joke itself. She had handled worse than this, harder conversations, higher stakes. And yet, something about that casual dismissal, the way her potential financial ruin had been framed as a punchline, lodged under her skin. "Actually," she said, voice calm, "can you explain something to me?" Daniel looked pleased, like a professor welcoming a question he was confident he could answer. "Sure." She tilted her head. "You said everything would be fine. What makes you so certain?" The room stilled again. Daniel shrugged. "Because it always works out." Emily nodded slowly. "For who?" Another laugh bubbled up from someone, short, uncertain, then quickly swallowed. The air shifted. This wasn't the script. Daniel's smile tightened. "Come on, Em. You've handled paperwork like this before. Remember the condo thing? You figured all that out." "That was my condo," Emily replied. A small pause. Not long enough to be dramatic, long enough to matter. Daniel waved it off. "Same skill set." Emily watched his face as he spoke. The ease, the lack of concern. He wasn't lying exactly. He just wasn't thinking past his own assumptions. In his mind, Emily was a constant, a reliable variable that would behave as expected. And expected, in this family, meant compliant. Her sister finally spoke, a little sharp. "Why are you interrogating him? He's just trying to help." Emily turned to her. "I'm not interrogating anyone. I'm asking questions." "About something that's already been decided," her sister snapped. That was new. Emily felt a strange, almost amused clarity wash over her. Already decided. Of course it had been. Without her. About her. She glanced back at Daniel. When was it decided? He hesitated, just a fraction. A misstep so small he probably thought no one saw it. "A while ago," he said. "We didn't think you'd mind." There it was. Emily leaned back into the couch, folding her arms loosely, not defensively, just comfortably. She felt oddly calm now. The tremor in her hand had stopped. "Funny," she said lightly. "I don't remember being part of that conversation." Daniel chuckled again, but this time it sounded thinner. "You were busy. Work, travel. You know how you are." Efficient, capable, always moving, always available when needed. Emily smiled. And yet, somehow always free to carry the risk. The humor landed this time, but not where Daniel intended. Her cousin snorted before catching himself. Her aunt coughed into her hand. Even her mother shifted uncomfortably. Daniel straightened. "You're reading too much into this." "Maybe," Emily said. "Or maybe I'm reading it for the first time." She stood, picked up her bag, and slung it over her shoulder. The movement drew everyone's attention, whether they wanted it to or not. "I'm going for a walk," she said. "I need some air." No one stopped her. As she stepped outside, the cold hit her face, sharp and bracing. Emily inhaled deeply, her breath fogging in front of her. Behind her, the house buzzed back to life, voices overlapping, explanations forming, the story already being rewritten without her. Emily smiled to herself, a dry, humorless thing. Because jokes were supposed to be funny. And that one had just shown her exactly how little room there was left for misunderstanding. The park was nearly empty. Late afternoon light filtered through bare branches, turning everything a muted gold, like the world had lowered its voice. Emily walked slowly, hands tucked into her coat pockets, boots crunching softly against the gravel path. Each step felt deliberate, as if her body were giving her mind time to catch up. She hadn't planned to come here. Her feet had just remembered. This park sat between her parents' old apartment building and the elementary school she used to attend. She hadn't been back in years, not consciously. But the body keeps its own map of things. She passes the swing set first. One swing twisted lazily in the wind, squeaking in protest. Emily winced. "Still dramatic," she murmured, glancing at it. The swing didn't argue. She slowed near a bench beneath a wide oak tree. For a moment, she considered sitting. Instead, she stayed standing, arms wrapped around herself, eyes unfocused. The memory didn't arrive all at once. It never did. It came in fragments, like a story her mind had learned to tell only in short, survivable bursts. Her father, kneeling. Not weak, just tired. A hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. The sound of vending machines humming in the distance. Her mother standing very still, as if movement might break something fragile. Emily, much smaller then, holding a plastic cup of water with both hands. "You're okay, right?" she had asked him. Not crying, not panicking, just checking, always checking. Her father had smiled at her, that soft, proud smile that meant you're being brave again. "Konchiurukma," he'd said. "I can handle it." He hadn't been talking about himself. Emily swallowed, her throat tightening as the memory settled. She had learned something important that day, not from words but from the shape of the moment. She had learned that strength was quiet, that love meant not adding weight to a heavy room, that being the one who can handle it made other people feel safe. No one had told her to be that child, but everyone had rewarded her for it. She remembered later, months later, her mother praising her to a neighbor. "Emily doesn't cause trouble. She understands." Understand what? Emily wondered now, as an adult. That other people's needs came first? That silence was a contribution? That being overlooked was the price of being relied on? She exhaled slowly. That lesson had followed her everywhere, through school, through work, through relationships that quietly assumed she would adapt. It had shaped her so completely that most days she didn't even feel it anymore. Until now. A sudden shout pulled her from her thoughts. A small child barreled past her, chasing a red ball that bounced unevenly along the path. The ball veered toward her feet, tapped her boot, and stopped. "Sorry," the child's mother called out, already hurrying over. "I'm so sorry." Emily bent and picked up the ball, handing it back with a polite smile. "It's okay." The mother smiled gratefully, ruffled the child's hair, and crouched to retie a loose shoelace with quick, practiced movements. Not a grand gesture, not a picture-perfect moment, just care, delivered without fanfare. Emily watched, something aching softly in her chest. Her father had tied her shoes like that, patient, focused, as if the small things mattered because they were hers. The mother stood, nodded once more at Emily, and guided the child away. They didn't look back. Emily remained where she was, staring at the spot they'd occupied. Family is where you are accounted for, she thought, not just relied on. She let the thought sit without arguing with it. No dramatics, no self-pity, just recognition. She resumed walking, slower now. Back at the house, they would be talking about her, framing the situation, deciding which version of events made the most sense. She could almost hear it. "She's stressed. She's always been sensitive. She'll come around." Emily almost laughed. The idea of her being sensitive after years of emotional heavy lifting was, frankly, impressive in its audacity. If emotional labor burned calories, she'd be unstoppable. She reached the end of the path and turned back, the cold seeping through her coat. Her mind felt clearer now, not because the problem had disappeared, but because its roots were visible. This wasn't just about money. It was about a pattern that had been quietly reinforced for decades. A role she'd slipped into so early that no one remembered choosing it for her, including herself. Emily stopped near the park entrance and looked back once more at the swings, the bench, the tree. The past didn't feel heavy right now. It felt instructive. She nodded, once, as if acknowledging an old teacher. "Okay," she said softly. "I see it." Then she turned and headed home, not to surrender, not to confront, but to prepare. Because understanding the wound didn't make it hurt more. It made it harder to ignore. And Emily was done pretending she didn't feel it. Emily hadn't meant to find it. That was the thing that unsettled her most, not the content itself, but the ease with which it appeared, as if it had been waiting patiently for her attention. No locked drawer, no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet mistake, delivered with the casual cruelty of modern technology. She was at her parents' dining table again, laptop open, helping her mother reset an email password. The same table, the same chair she'd sat in on Christmas night. Emily noticed, with mild irony, that no one had asked whether she was okay today. They had simply decided she was useful again. Her mother hovered nearby, fretting. "I don't know why it stopped working. Everything keeps changing." Emily nodded, fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. "It happens," she said. "Email likes to reinvent itself for no reason. Kind of like people." Her mother didn't catch that. Probably for the best. The inbox refreshed. A new email slid into view at the top of the screen. Emily froze. Not because she was snooping, she wasn't. The email was addressed directly to her mother. CC'd beneath it, unmistakably, was Daniel's work email. The subject line was short, almost bland. "Insurance update, confirmed." Emily's pulse ticked up. Not fast, not panicked, just alert. She told herself she was reading it to help, to make sure nothing important was missed. That was still true. It just wasn't the whole truth anymore. She clicked. The message was brief, professional, written by someone who billed by the hour. Policy remains under Daniel Tran as primary holder. No changes required prior to year-end. Liability assignment remains separate as discussed. Emily read it again and again. Primary holder. Liability assignment remains separate. Her name wasn't mentioned, not once. Her hands didn't shake this time. They went very still, resting on either side of the laptop. Somewhere behind her, the kettle whistled. Her mother fussed with mugs. Life continued, blissfully unaware that a line had just been crossed. "So is it fixed?" her mother asked. "Yes," Emily said calmly. "It should work now." She closed the email, logged out, and slid the laptop back across the table. Her mother smiled. "You're so good at this. I don't know what I'd do without you." Emily smiled back, polite, automatic. "You'd figure it out." That, at least, was true. She excused herself and stepped outside, the cold air grounding her. She didn't feel betrayed, not yet. Betrayal implied surprise. What she felt was confirmation. Daniel hadn't misspoken. He hadn't misunderstood. He hadn't been careless. He had been precise. Emily leaned against the railing and stared out at the street. Cars passed. Someone laughed a few houses down. The world, inconsiderate as ever, refused to pause for revelations. She replayed his words from the day before. "Everything will be fine. Just a formality. You're good with paperwork." She exhaled slowly. The insurance stayed with him. The risk came to her. Clean, efficient, invisible. Emily almost admired the elegance of it. Almost. A thought crossed her mind, dry, unwelcome, but undeniably funny. If manipulation were an Olympic sport, my family would at least medal. She shook her head, stifling a laugh that didn't quite make it out. Humor, she knew, was a pressure valve. Let too much out, and you lost focus. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. No dramatic declarations, no emotional processing, just facts. Insurance primary holder, Daniel. Liability assigned to me. Misunderstood without my consent. Alexander, before Christmas. She added one more line, then paused, considering it. Confidence suggests preparation. That part bothered her more than the rest, because Daniel hadn't sounded unsure. He hadn't sounded defensive. He had sounded practiced, as if the outcome had already been rehearsed, the objections anticipated, the roles assigned. Emily straightened. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation made people defensive. Defensive people lied better. Instead, she did what she had always done best. She observed. Over the next few days, Emily asked questions that sounded harmless, casual, almost boring. "What's the exact amount again? Which policy does that fall under? Who's the contact person for this?" She asked them at different times, to different people, never repeating the same question twice in the same way. She watched faces, listened to tone. Not for what was said, but for how quickly the answers came. Too quickly, too smoothly. Her sister answered without hesitation, but avoided specifics. Her mother deferred every question to Daniel. Her aunt changed the subject altogether, suddenly fascinated by unrelated details like grocery prices and the weather. And Daniel? Daniel never once asked why Emily wanted to know. That was the most telling part of all. One evening, as he scrolled through his phone, he said lightly, "You're really digging into this." Emily smiled. "You said it was straightforward." He laughed. "It is." She met his eyes. "Then it shouldn't be a problem." For just a second, half a second, his gaze slipped. Not fear, not guilt. Calculation. Emily looked away first, not because she had to, but because she had seen enough. She didn't need a confession. She didn't need an apology. She had confirmed what mattered. This wasn't an accident. This was a system. And Emily, finally, had proof that she had never agreed to be part of it. Whatever happened next would not be impulsive. It would not be loud. And it would not be kind to assumptions. She closed her notes app, slipped her phone back into her pocket, and smiled to herself. The investigation was over. The preparation had just begun. Emily became very easy to underestimate, not because she changed who she was, but because she stopped correcting people when they misunderstood her. She let assumptions land and stay where they fell. It was astonishing how quickly everyone relaxed once they believed the situation was under control again. She didn't argue. She didn't confront. She didn't bring up the email. Instead, she asked questions the way someone asks about dinner plans, lightly, without urgency, as if the answers didn't matter much. That was the trick. At breakfast, she asked her mother, "Do you remember the name of the insurance agent?" Her mother stirred her coffee. "Oh, Daniel handles that." Emily nodded. "Right, of course." Later that afternoon, she asked her sister, "Do you know which account the payments come from?" Her sister shrugged. "Some family account, I think." "Which one?" Her sister blinked, frowned. "Why does it matter?" Emily smiled. "Just curious." Curiosity was non-threatening. Curiosity was allowed. Suspicion, on the other hand, made people defensive. Emily had learned long ago that if you wanted the truth, you didn't announce you were looking for it. You acted like you already trusted everyone. She paid attention to timing. When people answered too fast, it meant they'd rehearsed. When they answered too slow, it meant they were editing. Both were useful. Daniel especially had a rhythm to him now, confident, polished, every response delivered with the smoothness of someone who had walked through this story in his head more than once. Emily watched him from the kitchen one evening as he explained something to their aunt, hands moving, voice calm, posture relaxed. He looked like a man solving a problem, not like a man caught in one. She felt a flicker of something close to admiration. It was impressive, really, if you ignored the ethics. If I were a less moral person, she thought dryly, I'd ask him for tips. That thought made her smile into her tea. No one noticed. That was another thing Emily had learned. People rarely notice calm. They notice resistance. They notice tears. They notice anger. Calm made you invisible. She used that invisibility deliberately. When Daniel mentioned timelines, Emily repeated the dates back to him later, but changed one detail, just slightly. A day off, a month shifted. Daniel corrected her instantly. Too instantly. "Right," Emily said, unfazed. "That's what I thought." He didn't catch the test. He just registered that she'd accepted the correction. In reality, Emily was mapping consistency. Who aligned with whom? Which facts were shared knowledge, and which were carefully compartmentalized? What emerged wasn't chaos. It was structure. Daniel held the central information. Her mother deferred. Her sister echoed. Others filled in gaps without ever seeing the whole picture. Everyone had just enough understanding to justify their role, and no more. It was efficient. It was also fragile. Because systems like that depended on one thing above all else: the quiet cooperation of the person at the bottom, Emily. One night, while loading the dishwasher together, her mother sighed. "I'm glad you're here. You always make things easier." Emily placed a plate carefully into the rack. "Do I?" Her mother laughed softly. "You know what I mean." Emily did know what she meant. You absorb things so we don't have to. She closed the dishwasher and leaned against the counter. "What happens if I don't?" Her mother looked startled, as if the question had never occurred to her. "Don't what?" "Make things easier." A pause. "Well," her mother said slowly, "we'd figure it out." Emily nodded. "Good." Her mother studied her face, searching for something, anger maybe, or reassurance. She found neither. That seemed to unsettle her more than any argument would have. Later that night, Emily sat alone, reviewing her notes again. They had grown longer, more detailed, still factual, still clean. She hadn't written how it felt to be dismissed, or how the joke had landed, or how the email had sat in her chest like a stone. Feelings could come later. Right now, she needed clarity. And clarity had arrived in an unexpected form. Daniel, growing comfortable again, had started to talk more freely. He explained processes without being asked, reassured without prompting. Each explanation polished his image as the competent eldest, the one keeping everything together. What he didn't realize was that every extra word gave Emily more context. "You don't need to worry," he said one evening. "I've handled situations like this before." Emily looked up from her phone. "You have?" "Yeah," he said. "Back when… well, never mind." Emily smiled pleasantly. "No, go on." He waved it off. "It's not relevant." But it was, because relevance wasn't defined by him anymore. Emily let it go, storing the moment away. She was past the stage of chasing explanations. She already knew enough to understand the shape of the truth. The real question now wasn't what they were doing. It was why they were so certain she would accept it. That certainty fascinated her. She realized then that no one had actually asked for her consent. They had informed her, pressured her, joked at her expense, but never truly asked. Consent, she thought, wasn't just about saying yes. It was about being given the space to say no. And no one had built that space for her. Emily closed her notebook. She didn't feel righteous. She didn't feel heroic. She felt awake. People mistook patience for agreement all the time, especially when it came from someone who had been accommodating for years. They forgot that patience could be strategic. And Emily, underestimated and unchallenged, had become very, very patient. Soon, that would matter. A lot. The answers came too fast. That was the problem. Emily noticed it during a casual conversation that shouldn't have mattered. A lazy afternoon, dishes drying on the rack, television murmuring in the background. Nothing formal, nothing tense. The kind of moment where people let their guard down because they believe the danger has passed. Her sister leaned against the counter, scrolling on her phone. "Daniel said the policy's airtight," she said, not looking up. Emily raised an eyebrow. "Airtight how?" Her sister shrugged. "Just covered, you know, no loose ends." Emily waited. Silence stretched. Her sister glanced up, frowning slightly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "I'm not," Emily said pleasantly. "I'm listening." Her sister huffed a laugh. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Ask questions like it's a test." Emily smiled. "Is it?" Her sister rolled her eyes. "Daniel already thought of everything." There it was again, that absolute confidence. Not "we thought of everything," not "it was discussed," just Daniel, singular, central, untouchable. Emily nodded. "What did he think of first?" Her sister blinked. "What?" "The order," Emily said. "What was the first thing he handled?" Her sister hesitated, just a beat too long. "The paperwork." Emily tilted her head. "Which paperwork?" Her sister's jaw tightened. "Why does it matter?" That question again. Emily felt a flicker of humor rise up, sharp and unwelcome. If I had $1 for every time someone asked me why it mattered, I wouldn't need an emergency fund. She swallowed the laugh before it escaped. "I'm just trying to understand," she said. Her sister exhaled loudly, already annoyed. "You're overcomplicating this. Daniel knows what he's doing." Emily thanked her and changed the subject. But inside, something clicked into place. Too fast, too polished, too aligned. Later that evening, Daniel joined her in the living room, carrying 2 beers. He handed her one like an offering. "Peace gesture," he said with a grin. Emily accepted it. "I didn't know we were at war." "We're not," he said quickly. "I just feel like you've been tense." Emily took a sip. "Have I?" "A little," he said. "You've been asking a lot of questions." She smiled. "That's new?" He laughed. "Fair." They sat in silence for a moment. The TV played something forgettable. Emily watched the reflection of the screen flicker across the window. Daniel spoke again, casual. "You don't need to worry so much. We've got it handled." "We. Interesting." Emily glanced at him. "Who's we?" Daniel gestured vaguely. "The family." She nodded. "And my role in that?" "You're helping," he said immediately. Too immediate. Helping. Not deciding. Not consenting. Helping. Emily leaned back. "Helping how, exactly?" Daniel smiled, patient in the way older siblings often are when they believe they're being generous. "By signing. By making things smoother." "Smoother for who?" she asked. "For everyone," he said. Emily watched his face as he said it. No flicker this time. No hesitation. He believed it. And that belief, that unexamined certainty, was the most dangerous thing in the room. She took another sip of beer and grimaced. "This is warm." Daniel laughed. "It's been sitting out." "Figures," she said. "Nothing here stays cold for long." He didn't catch the comment, or maybe he did and chose not to. Emily decided to push, just a little. "If it's so straightforward," she said, "why did the insurance stay in your name?" Daniel didn't miss a beat. "Because that's how it's always been." "And the liability?" "Temporary." "How temporary?" "As long as it needs to be." Emily nodded slowly. "Which is?" Daniel smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" There it was, the shift. "I'm doing what you said," Emily replied. "Understanding." Daniel set his beer down. "You're acting like we're trying to screw you over." Emily met his gaze. "Are you?" Silence. Not the comfortable kind. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "You're being dramatic." Emily felt a familiar urge to soften, to retreat, to reassure him that everything was fine, that she was fine, that she didn't mean anything by it. She let the urge pass. "I don't think I am," she said calmly. Daniel shook his head. "You always do this. You take things too seriously." Emily smiled faintly. "And you never do." That landed. Daniel stood. "Look, I don't want this to become a thing." "It already is," Emily said gently. He paused, hand on the back of the couch. For a moment, he looked almost tired. Then the mask slid back into place. "Just trust me," he said. Emily watched him walk away. Trust. That word had been doing a lot of unpaid labor lately. She sat alone, the TV still murmuring, her beer untouched beside her. The room felt different now, not hostile, not loud, just exposed. Like the set of a play after the lights go out, props suddenly obvious in the dark. Emily didn't feel triumphant. She felt certain. Because what she'd just seen wasn't confusion or chaos or misunderstanding. It was coordination. And coordination meant intent. If you were in Emily's place right now, hearing answers that were too smooth, watching people close ranks the moment you asked for clarity, what would you do next? Would you keep probing quietly? Or would you force the issue into the open and risk being labeled the problem? I want to know how you see it. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Emily turned off the TV and stood. She didn't need more questions answered. She needed to decide how much truth the room could handle, and whether she still cared if they were comfortable with it. Emily stopped asking everyone questions. That decision came quietly, without ceremony, while she was brushing her teeth one morning and staring at her own reflection. Her face looked the same, calm, composed, almost bored. No one would have guessed that she had already crossed an internal line. Interrogation made people perform. Performance blurred truth. She didn't need a full confession. She needed alignment. Who gained what and why? So she narrowed her focus. First, she followed the insurance. Not directly, not aggressively. She called the agency under the pretense of confirming contact details. Her voice was polite, unremarkable, the kind people forgot the moment the call ended. "Yes," the agent said cheerfully. "The primary policyholder is Daniel Tran." "And the beneficiary?" Emily asked, already knowing the answer. "Also, Daniel Tran." Emily thanked him and hung up. Simple, clean, profitable. Next, she followed the assets. That took longer, mostly because no one thought Emily would ever look. She wasn't that kind of person after all. She was the stable one, the helper, the one who handled logistics, not leverage. She remembered her sister mentioning a property sale in passing months ago, something about timing the market. At the time, Emily hadn't asked follow-up questions. She was busy. She trusted. Now, trust was off the table. A public records search confirmed it in minutes. The house had been sold in June. The proceeds hadn't gone into any shared account. They hadn't gone into a temporary holding fund. They had gone into her sister's personal account. Emily sat back in her chair, blinking once. She didn't feel angry. She felt impressed. Not in a good way. In the way you're impressed by a well-executed magic trick after you know how it's done. Everyone was protecting themselves, just not her. She pulled up her notes and added new lines. Still factual, still controlled. Insurance. Daniel. Reluctant sale. Sister. Deadliest. Me. Everyone. The pattern was undeniable now. Each person had secured their own exit ramp while gently steering her toward the crash site. Emily closed the laptop. She didn't feel like a detective. She felt like a participant who had finally been handed the program. There was no grand conspiracy, no secret meeting where everyone plotted together. That would have required courage. This was worse. This was opportunistic alignment. Each person acting in their own interest, trusting that Emily's sense of duty would absorb the collective risk. She almost laughed. The absurdity of it hit her all at once. If this were a movie, people would complain it was unrealistic. No one would be that blatant, they'd say. Someone would feel bad. But real life didn't rely on villains. It relied on silence. That afternoon, Emily ran into her brother-in-law in the hallway. He nodded at her, casual. "Heard you're sorting through paperwork," he said. "Some," Emily replied. "Good," he said. "You're good at that stuff." There it was again, that familiar refrain. Emily smiled sweetly. "So I've been told." He walked away, satisfied, unaware that he'd just reinforced her conclusion. No one saw her as someone who needed protection. They saw her as infrastructure. That realization didn't hurt the way it might have once. It clarified. Emily took a walk later that evening, hands in her pockets, the sky dimming to a soft gray. She passed families heading home, couples arguing quietly, a dog tugging its owner impatiently down the sidewalk. Life went on. She thought about confronting them all at once, laying out the facts, watching faces shift, hearing the scramble of excuses. The image didn't satisfy her. Public exposure would turn into public defense. Noise would drown out truth. No, this wasn't about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming agency. She would speak to them individually, not to accuse, not to persuade, to observe, to confirm what she already knew. Emily stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. By now, she had enough information to walk away entirely, to refuse without explanation, to protect herself and let the rest of it collapse under its own weight. That option sat there, heavy and tempting. But Emily wasn't finished yet, because before she closed this chapter, she wanted one thing: certainty. Not just about what they had done, but about who they were willing to be, once they realized she was no longer absorbing the damage. The light changed. Emily crossed the street, her step steady, her mind clear. The investigation phase was over. What came next would be quieter and far more revealing. Emily started with her mother, not because it made the most sense strategically, but because it made the most sense emotionally. You don't test the edges of a structure without first checking the foundation. They were alone in the kitchen, late evening. The house had settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs, the way old places do when they think no one is listening. Emily's mother dried dishes slowly, methodically, as if precision could keep the conversation light. Emily leaned against the counter, no notes, no phone, just her. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Her mother nodded. "Of course." "When did you know Daniel would be the insurance holder?" Emily asked. Her mother didn't stop drying the plate. "He's always handled that." "That's not what I asked." The plate paused mid-motion. Her mother set it down carefully. Too carefully. "Why are you asking this now?" Emily kept her voice even. "Because I'm the one being asked to sign." A long silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. Finally, her mother sighed. "We didn't think you'd object." Emily nodded once. "Did you think it was fair?" Her mother looked genuinely startled. "Fair?" "Yes." The word seemed to knock something loose. Her mother frowned, eyes narrowing. Not in anger, but in confusion. "We're family," she said. "We all do what we can." Emily waited. Her mother's shoulders slumped slightly. "Daniel has responsibilities. The others have their own burdens. You're steady." There it was. Emily felt a familiar tug in her chest, an old reflex to reassure, to smooth. She resisted it. "So the plan was for me to carry the risk," she said, "so no one else had to." Her mother's lips pressed together. "We knew you could handle it." Emily smiled faintly. "That's not an answer." Her mother didn't argue. She didn't apologize either. She just looked tired. Emily thanked her for her honesty and left the kitchen. Next was her sister. They sat in her sister's room, the door half closed, as if secrecy were a habit rather than a choice. Clothes lay draped over a chair, tags still on some of them. New purchases. Comfortable purchases. Emily sat on the bed. "I saw the property sale from June." Her sister's head snapped up. "What?" "The house," Emily continued. "You sold it." Her sister crossed her arms. "That was mine." "Yes," Emily said, "and the money went into your account." "So?" her sister snapped. "What does that have to do with this?" Emily tilted her head. "You're asking me to assume risk for the family while protecting your assets." Her sister scoffed. "That's not the same thing." "How?" Emily asked. Her sister opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted away. "I earned that." Emily nodded. "And I didn't?" Her sister's voice rose. "You're making this sound selfish." Emily smiled sadly. "I'm describing it accurately." Silence fell. Her sister's shoulders dropped. "You always do this," she muttered. "You make everyone feel bad." Emily stood. "No, I just stopped pretending." She left before the conversation could turn into a performance. Then came Daniel. They met in the den late. No audience, no props. Just the two of them and a room that suddenly felt too small for all the unspoken things. Daniel leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "So," he said, "you've been talking to everyone." Emily didn't deny it. "Yes." "Are you satisfied?" he asked. She studied him for a moment. The confidence, the polish, the man who had always been just a little too comfortable deciding outcomes. "I am," she said. He smiled. "Good. Then we can move on." Emily shook her head. "No. Now we can be honest." His smile faltered. About what? The fact that you never planned to share the risk, she said. Just the responsibility. Daniel's jaw tightened. I did what was best for the family. For yourself, Emily corrected. He laughed sharply. That's not fair. Neither is liability without benefit. He stepped closer. You're blowing this out of proportion. Emily met his eyes. You kept the insurance. You kept control. You gave me exposure. Silence. Not denial, not defense. Just quiet. Finally, Daniel sighed. You're good at handling things. Emily almost laughed. Almost. The line was so tired, so overused, it felt like an inside joke no one else realized was cruel. That doesn't mean I should, she said. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. What do you want me to say? Emily thought about that. About apologies that came too late. About explanations that didn't change outcomes. I don't need you to say anything, she replied. I needed to see whether you would. He didn't. Emily nodded once. That's all. She walked out, leaving Daniel alone with his silence. By the end of the night, she felt strangely light. No one had denied anything. No one had apologized. No one had tried to fix it. And that told her everything she needed to know. Relationships don't always break with noise. Sometimes they just stop holding. Emily went to bed knowing she would sleep well. Not because the situation was resolved, but because it was finally clear. And clarity, she had learned, was a kind of freedom too. The morning felt different, not brighter, not lighter, just quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after a decision has already been made, even if no one else knows it yet. Emily noticed it as she poured herself coffee, the sound of the liquid hitting the mug oddly loud in the still kitchen. She didn't rush. There was no adrenaline, no racing thoughts. The urgency had passed. What remained was intention. Emily sat at the table with her notebook open, not the emotional kind, not a journal full of processing, but the same clean, practical pages she had always used. Bullet points, dates, names, facts. She reviewed them once more, not to convince herself, but to ensure nothing was missing. Nothing was. She closed the notebook. That, she realized, was the moment. The one people rarely talk about. Not the confrontation, not the explosion, but the quiet internal click where you stop trying to understand and start preparing to act. Understanding was over. She had given them chances, unspoken but real. Chances to correct, to include, to hesitate. They hadn't taken them. Not because they were malicious, but because they were comfortable. Comfort had been their choice. Now distance would be hers. Emily showered, dressed, and packed her bag. Nothing dramatic. Laptop, wallet, folder. She paused, then added the document, the unsigned one, sliding it into the folder with deliberate care. Down the hall, voices drifted. Normal conversation, plans for the day. The illusion of continuity. She stepped into the living room. Daniel sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up. Morning. Morning, Emily replied. Her mother looked up from the kitchen. Coffee? I'm good, Emily said. She could feel it then, the expectation hanging in the air. Not conscious, not verbalized, but heavy all the same. The assumption that this would resolve itself, that she would sign, that things would go back to normal. Normal, Emily thought, was a system that worked for everyone except her. She walked to the window and looked out. The street was busy now. Life moving forward, indifferent to family arrangements and financial traps. She spoke without turning around. I won't be signing, she said. The words landed softly, no anger, no accusation, just fact. Silence followed. Daniel laughed once, a reflex. Come on. Emily turned to face him. I'm serious. Her mother's face tightened. Emily. I've decided, Emily said. This isn't my responsibility. Daniel stood. You're overreacting. No, she replied. I'm responding. Her sister stepped into the room, eyes sharp. Do you know what this will do to everyone? Emily nodded. Yes. And you're okay with that? Emily considered the question, thought about the years of being okay with outcomes she didn't choose, about the cost of silence, about the quiet resentment that had almost convinced her this was just how life worked. I'm okay with not sacrificing myself to prevent discomfort, she said. Daniel shook his head. This is selfish. Emily didn't flinch. So is expecting me to carry everyone else's risk. The room buzzed with tension now. Words hovered, ready to be thrown. Emily didn't wait for them. She picked up her bag. I'm not asking permission, she said. I'm informing you. Her mother's voice cracked. Where are you going? Emily paused at the door, not because she needed approval, but because endings deserved honesty. I'm going to protect what I built, she said. For the first time. No one stopped her. No one followed. She stepped outside, the door closing behind her with a soft, final sound. Emily stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the cold air. Her hands were steady. Her chest felt open, unburdened. She had lived the way her father taught her, doing her part, carrying weight without complaint. But somewhere along the way, that lesson had been taken too far, turned into an expectation that erased her agency. Today, she corrected it. Emily walked down the steps and didn't look back. Behind her, the house remained full of people trying to figure out what had just happened. Ahead of her was something unfamiliar. Space. And for the first time, it belonged entirely to her. Emily didn't feel victorious as she walked away. Victory implied a battle, and this hadn't been one. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no cinematic reckoning. What she felt instead was alignment, the rare, grounding sensation of her actions finally matching her values. She understood something now that she hadn't before. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight harder, but to stop volunteering yourself as collateral. Life wouldn't magically become easier after this. Some relationships would cool. Some conversations would never happen again. But for the first time, the cost of her choices would be paid by her, not quietly transferred, not disguised as obligation, not wrapped in guilt. And that made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the reliable one, the easy one, the person everyone leans on without asking how much weight you're carrying, then you already know this isn't just fiction. It's a mirror. There are more stories like this coming. Stories about boundaries, power, silence, and the moments that quietly change everything. If you want to keep walking through them with me, subscribe. Stay here. The next story might sound uncomfortably familiar, and that's usually where the truth lives.